So the first question is, why do we need organized religion? What is the need for a central governance?
Why do we need organized religion? One person once said to me, I don't like organized religion. I said, you'll love us, we're completely disorganized. But still, we try to be organized. Why do you need organized religion? Well, let me ask you a question. Do you like organized shopping centers?
I'm not sure.
That was a bad question. Let's try another one. Do you like organized roads?
They're okay.
Do you like organized airports?
They're okay.
They're okay. Do you prefer disorganized airports?
I think I mostly experience organized.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I don't think you like disorganized airports. I've been to plenty. We like organized airports. We want everything to be on time. We want things to be structured. It's effective. It's efficient. We like organized hospitals where the doctors come on time and they do what they're meant to do. We like organization. Actually, organization allows things to be very efficient and effective. It actually serves for better relationships. It can, really create better harmony. But I think what you don't like about organization is that sometimes it can become about the externals more than the internals. So I think the problem when people say they don't like organized religion is it's not so much that they don't like structure or they don't like the fact that things run in a certain way and there's, there's efficiency and effectiveness to it. I think they don't like the bad effects of organized religion. Would you agree with that?
That might be right, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like we don't like because it becomes about power, position, it becomes about popularity. Sometimes it becomes about the externals more than the internals when we have an organization. So the first thing I just want to share is that organization is not a bad thing if it's done in the right way, because organization can help us to achieve our goals. And we've all experienced the benefit of that. Now, the real question is, I think, how do we make sure that the organization doesn't make us forget the essence? And that's why in any organized religion, you always need deeply spiritual people. Deeply spiritual people who are actually reminding everyone of the essence. Because if those deeply spiritual people aren't there and the people leading a religion are just doing it because they have managerial skills but not spiritual insight, then the essence can be lost. So I would say let's have organized religion with deep spiritual inspiration and genuine insight and purity. And then that combination is actually amazing. In fact, Srila Prabhupada said this movement will go on by organization and intelligence, but not at the expense of purity and realization. So those things have to go together.
So what about central governance? Why can't each temple be independent and not have some higher power interfere with their business?
Actually, the way ISKCON is set up is that practically Srila Prabhupada did set it up that each temple is independent. That's why each temple has its own finances, its own accounts, its own governance. And yes, there is a central body, there is the GBC. Srila Prabhupada wanted the GBC in place. Actually, he said that his spiritual master wanted the same thing for his own institution, the Gaudiya Math. But when that instruction was not followed, it led to fragmentation and fighting and even more materialism within the community of spiritualists. So Srila Prabhupada wanted ISKCON to have central governance, but that's not to stifle, to control, or to limit, or to impede the innovation and initiative and inspiration of each individual center. So practically we see in ISKCON, each temple has its own independence. Is that true? Yes. practically. Maybe some guidance is given on certain standards, but the vision for the temple, the strategy, the ideas, the innovation, all comes locally, generally.
Have this, but still there's a centralized power that has the last say on like matters. So, but about that centralized power, doesn't experience tell us that when the power is centralized, that it's a breeding ground for corruption? And in that case, how do we prevent?
Yeah, that is true. But that's why in the Vedic system of Varnashram, you have Kshatriyas, who are the managers, who are basically the executive. They're the ones that basically execute things, and you know, they're the ones with control over land, power, resources, etc. But in the Varnashram system, along with the Kshatriyas, you have Brahmanas, you have spiritual guides, you have spiritual inspiration, those who are independent of concern for money and power.
Jai.
And so in the original Vedic system, you need to have an executive body, but that executive body is balanced with a spiritual body. And in that way, the executive never becomes corrupted. But what we see in the world today, and in many religions, is that there's executive without spiritual guidance. And that becomes dangerous. Because sometimes those who are in positions of power may not be able to see the bigger picture, or may get sidetracked, and therefore the mission may drift from what it's actually meant to do. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Therefore we need, as I was mentioning, spiritual inspiration, insight, guidance, leadership, along with management and execution.
Is that possible in Kali Yuga though? Because Kalo, Shudra, Sambhavana, everyone is Shudra or lower.
Yes, Kalo Sudra Sambhava, everyone is a Sudra, but Shastra says, Janmana Jayate Sudra Samskarat Bhavet Dvija Vedapatat Bhavet Vipro Brahma Jana Titi Brahmana. Yes, Kalo Sudra Sambhava. Everyone's a Sudra. Shastra says, Janmana Jayate Sudra, you're born a Sudra. Doesn't matter what family you're in. But Vedapatat, if you study the Shastra from the genuine gurus and the sadhus, and then you apply it in your life, then Brahma Jana Titi Brahmana. In that way, by understanding Brahman, by understanding spiritual knowledge, and by realizing it in your life, you become a Brahmana. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada said the ISKCON movement is made for making Brahmanas. So yes, there are, and we see in our society practically today, there are individuals who have deep spiritual insight and realization, and they are successfully leading many things. So yes, but it must be, they must qualify themselves.
So on the other side of organized religion, what if it becomes too adjusted to modern society, too diluted? How do we protect the philosophy or the culture that we want to foster without it becoming too much influenced by modern ideas or modern standards?
Yes. For anything to remain relevant, there has to be preservation and adaptation. If we only preserve, then we'll have the right philosophy and everything, but we will become irrelevant to the world. And if we only adapt, then we may be relevant to the world, but we may not succeed in giving people the substance. We may dilute. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada was the ideal example of someone who adapted while preserving. In fact, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, the Ganga is always changing its course. And so if someone says, no, we've always been bathing in the Ganga in this place, and therefore we must always go to the same place, then he said that person is a fool, because they don't understand that the Ganga is moving. So if you want to get the mercy of the Ganga, then you also have to move, not just follow the tradition of what you've been doing. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was also a great innovator So I think the first thing we have to realize is that innovation, adaptation, becoming relevant to the time is absolutely necessary for a movement to stay relevant. Society has changed. People's culture has changed. The world is a constantly mutating place, and therefore we always have to adapt. But yes, we must keep the principles in mind. And therefore the key is to understand what is a principle that can't be changed at any time, and what is a detail that can be adapted in order to become more relevant to the world, and not to mix them up.
Yeah, that's the question. How do we, if we change the details a lot, how do we ensure that we don't mess with the principle also?
Yeah, Srila Prabhupada said that requires a little intelligence. So therefore we have many Vaishnavas who come together, who then discuss and debate and try to look at each situation from many angles of vision with reference to Srila Prabhupada's teachings, and then ultimately we have to try to make a call, and we have to ensure that we're following both things. It's just as dangerous as changing a principle is not changing a detail. Both things are actually dangerous. So sometimes people think preserving is always the safe option, but sometimes that can also be, in many cases, just as dangerous. For example, you see, just to take a business example, for example, Blockbuster Video. I'm going to connect this spiritually in a minute. But Blockbuster Video, what they did when Netflix came out is they just decided, no, we've always done it this way. We've always rented out videos from a store. And these new guys on the scene, they've come out with some new idea, but these ideas come and go. And therefore Blockbuster didn't decide to respond to that change. And the net result is that Blockbuster went bust. They literally went bust. Blockbuster got busted. Because they didn't change with the times. So we have to ask us, Srila Prabhupada was so expert, he made it relevant. And that was why Krishna consciousness blew up. Of course, along with the purity. But Srila Prabhupada when Srila Prabhupada came to America, he said, for 2 months in Butler, I was simply observing the people. What are they into? What do they like? What's on their mind? We have to understand the world if we want to connect to them. And then we have to expertly see how to do it. So.
Can you think of a detail that would be dangerous for this movement to not change?
You mean a principle?
No, you said the detail could be dangerous not to change.
Oh, a detail that's not... for example, what can I give an example of? For example, a preaching technique. For example, Srila Prabhupada, he said, in India, he told the devotees, don't do Harinam at a certain time. But he said, but the chanting of the holy name must go on. That's the Yuga Dharma. But going on the street and specifically doing it in that way in India at that time was something that he felt would discredit the movement. So for a period of time, he actually told the devotees not to do that, because he said it would be counterproductive to our mission. But the principle is that the holy name must go out. People must hear the holy name. But there are different ways in which we can get the holy name to people. So that was an example of how Srila Prabhupada said just holding on to one idea of how it should be done can be dangerous. So I guess that could be an example. But not that we should stop giving the holy name. That must be given. But Prabhupada actually said, no, do it in other ways. Or for example, if you go to, a very hostile country, and you just decide no, Harinam Sankirtan is what we do. We go out on the street and you just do it in a very hostile country, that could be very counterproductive, you know. So you have to be smart how you do it. So in many of our countries, we don't go out on Harinam on the street, but we spread the holy name in other ways. So we have to be expert to understand how to adjust. There's questions, I don't know, whenever you're the facilitator.
Okay, I have a question too. So, can you also think of like a situation where you could be dangerously close to changing a principle by changing the details too much?
100%.
Yeah.
And that the example that I just gave is also a borderline one which can also be very dangerous. Because then it can just be like, oh no, Harinam is just a detail, and then gradually it can go off and off and off to the extent that we don't actually try to give people the holy name. And then, you know, Harinam eva kevalam, that's the only way in Kali Yuga, but it can go down that path. Therefore, we have to be very balanced, and we have to be very observant of our own selves.
So it seems like these things require some fluidity of thought and thinking, but organized religion has a tendency to create a very rigid type of thinking where everyone is supposed to think in the same way. So there's a danger in that. You say don't speculate.
Yeah.
And you lose so much of your capacity to evolve.
Yeah. Many devotees have actually been talking about this, about how in ISKCON we have to try to perhaps decentralize more. That doesn't mean you stop having any kind of central coordination, but what you allow more is cultural variety for devotees who are in their areas, who know their time, place and circumstance, to be able to appropriately do things according to what will be relatable in their specific areas. And so, yeah, the idea, I don't think it's like one or the other. Like you can have like central coordination that facilitates local innovation and initiative and independence. I don't think it has to be one or the other. Like it's like, complete like anarchy, or it's like, complete dictatorship, No, there are different models in between which can ensure, because centralization has benefits and drawbacks, and independent creative mentality has the same. So we have to try to get the benefits of both, and in that way marry them to get the both, yeah.
Just comment on that, because it seems like there's two different sides of the movement. They're split on one topic. It would seem like it would be maybe more favorable for them to go a little bit their separate ways, and each
in their own areas.
Yeah, practice in their own areas, in their own sangha, and then they stop criticizing each other. And that would be...
Yeah, there could be, there's a good case for that, and I probably agree with you in many situations. There are certain topics which some devotees feel very strongly about that could be harmful if we compromise on them in their opinion for the wider movement, and they may require some discussion. But yeah, I think you're right. And in many cases, the way that we approach Krishna consciousness, for example, in the Middle East is going to be very, very different, like we have this whole debate about, dhotis or not dhotis. But it doesn't matter what side of the debate you're on that one. When you go to an airport in the Middle East, don't wear a dhoti. I mean, there's no choice. It's a different atmosphere, it's a different circumstance. You can't, so, thank you.
May I ask something on a different topic, or should we just stick to this topic now?
Yeah. Oh, you're going totally out of the topic, or in the topic by different point? Oh, different topic.
Maybe we should stick.
Maybe we can do it in the end. So I have a question. How can we ensure that organizational goals don't overshadow internal transformation? Like, for example, so that the sadhana doesn't become making money for the temple only, or like that.
Yeah. That's why it's really important in every community that along with service authorities and structures to achieve the goals of the Krishna consciousness movement, which aren't material, which are also spiritual. It's not that the Lakshmi we collect or the number of books that go out or, those things are material. No, those are also part. Srila Prabhupada said, when I hear the scores, it gives me life. So that's not material, but you're right, it can become just about numbers. And therefore, in every community, it's really important that along with those kind of systems and structures for the service, we also have ways and means for devotees to get support in their spiritual journey. And therefore, for example, things like devotee care, making sure everyone has someone to speak to, making sure that there are mentors, shiksha gurus who are helping devotees to set goals so they can improve and grow and progress in their life. Oftentimes, many of our communities miss things like this, and therefore people in the community then to begin to think, oh, it's just about getting the service done, but no one's interested in me, my spiritual progress. And that may or may not be true, but we have to try to create systems whereby there's enough facility for devotees to do that. Because ultimately the institution is called the Krishna Consciousness Movement, which doesn't just mean we're going to spread Krishna consciousness out there, but it means we must also be moved within our heart by Krishna consciousness. One devotee used to say to me is achar and prachar, your own spiritual practice and preaching that Krishna consciousness. But if you take out the achar, then if you take achar out of prachar, then it simply becomes PR. Or just a public relation exercise to try to convince everyone else, but there's no real substance there. So, it's... we have to interact with it. One devotee gave me a nice example of our spiritual life and the institution, and this is how they explained it, which I thought was very good. They said the institution is like a river, a flowing river, and your spiritual life is like a boat. So if your boat sits nicely on the river, then that river and the boat together can help you go to your destination. But the moment that river enters into the boat, then it will actually sink it. So we live in ISKCON, we serve in ISKCON. ISKCON is Srila Prabhupada's movement, his dream for spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. And therefore we serve and we dedicate ourselves to ISKCON. But at the same time, we have to remember that my institutional identity is a role that I'm playing. But my ultimate identity is Jivara Swarupa Hoy, Krishna Nitya Das. I'm a servant of Krishna. Somehow or other in this life, I have to fall in love with Krishna. I have to fall madly in love. Prabhupada writes a letter to a GBC. It's very interesting, and he's explaining how to be a GBC. And then in the final line, Srila Prabhupada writes, and don't forget your main duty as a GBC is to be mad after Krishna. To be mad after Krishna. So that's the goal. So somehow we have to figure both things. Yeah.
Are there different ways that this river can enter into the boat, and how could that look in reality?
It means when we think, we identify with our positions, we identify with our institutional identities, we identify with our abilities. And then when we lose those abilities, or we lose those positions or titles, or even sometimes we lose a service position that we have, then we almost feel like we have no spiritual life left. So therefore, we take those roles of service, but then we understand that ultimately we have to develop some love for Krishna. And if Krishna changes it around, then I move with that plan. So question.
Yeah.
The boat are going into the boat, can it also be like the institution is like kind of pressing too much the individual or expecting too much from the individual devotee, and in this way going into the life of the devotee, like into the boat? Could you give some?
As in, you mean like too many expectations of the individual, or too many demands?
Kind of taking the individuality from the devotee and seeing, like it was a little bit in the past like that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. There has to be a lot of... Srila Prabhupada was so amazing because he was such an expert manager, but he was so kind, he was so human, he was so down to earth, he was so personal. Srila Prabhupada was a world acharya, but when a devotee was sick, he personally went and he told them an Ayurvedic recipe of how to get better. That level of personal touch. So I think in our communities we need good management, but we also need that human touch, that kindness and that balance. Even the Goswamis of Vrindavan, if you look at them, they were very, very influential. They were creating temples, they were preaching to kings, but then what would they do? They would just walk around Govardhan. And they would go village to village, it's explained in Bhakti Ratnakar. And when they would go into the village, then everyone would come and surround them because everyone loved them. And then they would ask, and how's your daughter? Did she get married? And if there was some conflict, then they would mediate the conflict. And how's your health? And they were just so down to earth. They were so kind. They were so personal. So perhaps we also need more of that, more personal touch, more kindness, more along with systems and structures. And I think where there's that beautiful balance, then naturally things will thrive more and more. Yeah, some thoughts.
So I know I'm deeply culturally conditioned to be adverse to organized religion. So for me it took after I became attracted to Krishna, it took several years before I started coming regularly to the temple. So how can we present this movement in a palatable way to people in general who have this conditioning by the culture outside?
Yeah, in the age we're living in Kali Yuga, it's actually an age of skepticism because people have misused our faith so many times in our life. Oftentimes people grew up and people that they put faith in took advantage. Sometimes we look at the world around us and we feel the government is taking advantage, the media are taking advantage, the wealthy are taking advantage. And therefore what we end up doing is we build a wall around us. And we don't want people to come in. And then we move away from anything where there's any sense of authority that I have to surrender to. But actually, faith in authority is actually one of the most beautiful things. Faith is a beautiful thing. Life without faith is not life at all. Because faith helps you to go beyond all the boundaries that your mind has created and imprisoned you within. Faith helps you to explore and find a world of unlimited possibility that you didn't know existed. I can say for myself, in the first 10 years of my Krishna consciousness, I never really let anyone into my life. I was like, it's not that I didn't like the devotees. I liked the devotees, but I was like, yeah, I'm doing my thing. I follow Srila Prabhupada, and I'm making my goals. And I didn't really let anyone into my life. And then, after that, I realized I've come to the point where I think I need help if I want to go further. And then I began to try to form relationships with devotees where I would actually let them into my life, advise me, help me to form goals, where they would actually start telling me to do things that normally by myself I would never do. And now when I reflect back, It's those relationships that opened up all these doors of opportunity in my spiritual life that I never knew existed. Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he used to give the definition of a guru. He said a guru is that person in your life who can give you a vision for your life that's much greater than you could have come up with yourself. So imagine you have faith in someone in your life who's able to open up a vision for what you can be, what you can do for Krishna, that you could not have come up with yourself. It's such a beautiful thing. Therefore, even the Shastra says, Yasya deve para bhaktir yatha deve tatha guru tasyaite katita hyarta prakashante mahatmana. That if you're able to develop the same quality of faith that you have in Krishna, Yasya deve tatha guru, in the Guru, the same faith that you have in Krishna, if you're able to develop that in a Guru, then all the imports of Vedic literature can be revealed to you. It's a powerful statement. So faith is such a beautiful quality, but in the world we're living in today, it's just practically being obliterated. Because, so they say Kali Yuga means followers question everything and leaders do questionable things. So it's a double problem. Because the followers question everything and the leaders sometimes they do also questionable. So there's this air of skepticism, like don't surrender. So yes, it shouldn't be blind, but we shouldn't also remove that.
So sometimes, let's say we're on book distribution, we present the books, have a look at our books, yoga, meditation, you have some talk on the philosophy, but then they give the approach that this all sounds very good, but if this is religion, then I don't want it. You know, what do you say to them?
Well, it depends what they mean by religion. Krishna says, abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto me. So if by religion you mean rituals, institutions, if by religion you mean just rules and regulations, that's not the essence of life. But if you talk about religion in its true sense, the Latin for religion is religare, which means to again connect. So religion in its true essence is to connect. But religion in today's day and age is a loaded word with so many connotations. Therefore people, like now in the Western world, the biggest thing is SBNR. I don't know if you know. I'm spiritual but not religious. But if you think about it in its true essence, religion and spirituality are the same thing. So yeah, depends what you mean by religion.
Yeah, that's a good question to start asking.
Yeah, because everyone has a different notion of what religion is. Yeah.
Those were my questions, so if anyone else has a question, Jiva Kesha had something, if you remember.
Yeah, I read in the books of your founder of your movement that he says that women are less intelligent. So I was just wondering, because we see in the world today, in the academic world and in the scientific world, that there are women as well as men, and it doesn't seem that they are always less intelligent. That there are many women who are much as intelligent as the men. So, do you really believe that ladies are less intelligent?
It's a very intelligent question. Yes. The first thing is to understand is that whenever we're reading an author, it's also really important to see what that author also did in their life. And so the same Srila Prabhupada who makes the statement, women are less intelligent, he made women presidents of temples, he put women on the Vyasasan to speak about the philosophy, he had them answer questions and write many, many things, and gave them many positions of responsibility within his movement. So that's already interesting and gives you another level of understanding what is the author actually saying. In the world today, they say there are different types of intelligence. And broadly speaking, we can say like two main types of intelligence are emotional intelligence and analytical intelligence. So generally, and it's not always the case, but generally the male body is more furnished with analytical intelligence and the female body is furnished more with emotional intelligence. That's why, for example, if you go to a primary school, generally you find it's all female teachers. Because in primary school, what's more required is emotional intelligence of how to nurture, how to grow, how to inspire, how to bring them up. And then later on you find that often in the more analytical subjects it tends to be men. Of course, there are exceptions. So when Srila Prabhupada is specifically talking about women being less intelligent, he's specifically talking about a type of intelligence referring to like philosophical analysis. However, Srila Prabhupada himself showed by his own conduct that there can be exceptions to that rule. Srila Prabhupada himself said that when you actually connect on the spiritual platform, then you also transcend the limitations of your body and mind. And therefore someone who's in a female body but who has reached a level of transcendence is no longer limited by that body. So you see, in the world we're living in today, in order to create equality, what they've tried to do is make everything the same. This is the big problem of the world we're living in today. That in the noble endeavor to make everyone equal, they've tried to make everyone the same. But you can honor difference, you can celebrate difference, and at the same time have equality. And so Srila Prabhupada often he made statements about different types of body, different types of people, to show that there are differences, but those differences are beautiful and they can be beautifully used to help people understand their strengths and weaknesses and ultimately to do amazing things for Krishna. So yes, I would say that whenever reading an author, like in the world today, one really important study is something called hermeneutics. And hermeneutics is how you understand a spiritual literature or a spiritual author. And there is a certain framework by which you can understand that what you're taking away from the message of scripture or from the message of an author takes account of many angles of vision. And therefore you get a much more wholesome understanding. Yes. Just before we go to you, would you like to?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I know nobody came here to hear my commentary, but can I tell you what
Yes, you please share. Yes. Yeah, you please. Yeah, that would be nice.
So this specific question, I think, refers back to Bhagavan Gita, where Krishna says,
Striyo vaishas tata sutrastepi yanti padam gatim.
So
Yeah.
these women, Shudras and Vaishyas,
Even they can attain the supreme destination.
Yes, so this means they're more or less on the same level. So the self-manifested Brahmanas and Kshatriyas are few and far between. So mostly we don't have to worry so much about who is most intelligent, because Kala Shudra Sambhava, everyone is on the Shudra or the woman level, so it doesn't really matter. As you take the Krishna consciousness,
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter. So those few, we can live with that. They are more intelligent, but mostly they're more intelligent than the men as well.
Yeah. And ultimately, being intelligent is not like... actually, Queen Kunti says intelligence can also be a distraction, it can be a disqualification, it can actually block your spiritual journey as well. Janmeshwarya Shruta, she says, education, learning, intellectual ability. Srila Prabhupada often said that ladies have a simple type of faith which men don't have, which is actually very beautiful, because it allows them to invest a part of their heart in the process of bhakti that for men who tend to be very analytical is sometimes a block. And it's very interesting, if you look in the Bhagavatam, all these hierarchies are ultimately flipped. Because we have our conceptions, oh, they're higher than them. We think, Brahmanas are higher than Sudras. But then you have Sutta Goswami, who's of a pratiloma birth, a lower birth, and he's instructing all the sages of Naimisharanya who are Paka Brahmanas. We think men are higher than women, but then you have the wives of the Kaliya serpent and the wives of the Yogic Brahmanas who turn out to be way more exalted than their male counterparts. We think even like demigods are higher than demons, for sure, but then you have Vritrasura, who's in a demon body, who's like more exalted than Indra. So ultimately the Bhagavatam reverses all the hierarchies that our mental constructs put up as to who's higher and lower. So even if it were the case that all men are more intelligent than ladies, that still doesn't have any bearing, because it's not really about intelligence, it's about love. Who has love? That's the real thing. Yes? Yes.
Yes, so considering now the discussion and the different points which were made, that like bhakti is over intelligent, and that men and women can be both, women can be sometimes more intelligent. Then why is it such an issue in ISKCON that women can be gurus, diksha gurus? Why is it such an issue? Why is it such a controversial and such an issue? Considering all these discussions which we have now.
Yeah, it's 7 o'clock now. This is a big issue, big conversation. I think there's no doubt in our philosophy. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Kiba Vipra, Kiba Nyashi, Shudra Kene Noi, Jai Krishna Tattva Veta Say Guru Hoy. Whoever knows the science of Krishna, they are Guru. So I think everyone in the society knows that anyone can be a Guru, because that's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says. Jai Krishna, whoever knows the... I think the only question is what type of guru, and whether the role of a Diksha guru and that institutional position, not just institutional position, but position in Varanashram, is that a restricted position for those in a certain type of body. So I'm just saying that to say that I don't think even those who say that women should not be Diksha gurus, I don't think what they're saying is that women can't guide, women can't inspire, women can't provide deep spiritual insight and guidance to help people in their spiritual journey. I think even those who say that are not saying that. What they're questioning is whether that formal title should be given. And that's really the debate that's going on.